there's a spiritual solution to every problem. It makes a very large claim, the title of this program. Where we are right now is perhaps the most fitting place we could be to talk about this subject. We're in Concord, Massachusetts, at the First Parish. If you look right up here to my right, there's a balcony, and Ralph Waldo Emerson and his family would come and sit there when they were children on Sundays. His grandfather, William Emerson, was the minister here when the shot that was heard around the world was fired. That started the American Revolution, followed by the French Revolution, and all of the changes that took place in the history of humanity. Much of it started right here at this First Parish, on this site where we are now seated. And this program is really about transcendent ideas. The idea that within each and every one of us, there is something much more that most of us haven't even begun to tap, that allows us to create for ourselves a solution to things that we have called problems in our lives. Transcendentalism was born here. And transcendentalism isn't an ism that you join. You don't pay any dues. You have to remember that back in the 1830s and 40s and 50s, there were things going on in this country and in this world that today we find intolerable. Slavery was an accepted practice at that time. But right here in Massachusetts, in Concord, people like Emerson and Bronson Alcott, who was the father of Louise May Alcott, and Nathaniel Hawthorne, Henry David Thoreau, people who would come to the school of philosophy and talk about ideas about how to abolish such things as slavery. All of those ideas and more. The idea that somehow this notion that we are wicked, or that we are born in sin, or that there's something wrong with us as people, all of this was being discussed here in this place, in this beautiful place where new transcendent ideas took place. I was introduced to these kinds of ideas when I was a young boy. I was a sophomore in Detroit on the east side at Denby High School. And I had a biology teacher. And my biology teacher was a very well-meaning, a very nice man. And he asked me if I would, and as he did everybody else in the class, if we would like to pass biology, that we would like to turn in something called a leaf collection. Now, I had already passed leaves. I had identified all the leaves that there were to identify and gotten a good grade on them. But he said, no, you have to do something more. You have to collect a whole bunch of them and turn them in for an assignment and prove that you have seen them. And I told him, in probably not the most diplomatic of ways, I won't be doing that. It just doesn't make any sense to me. At that time, there were some tough things going on in my own family, and I was working, and my mom was going through a hard time, and there was a divorce situation taking place, and it just seemed like a waste of time to me. And I've always kind of been one of those people who, and I'm not saying that I encourage this, I'm just saying that I recognize it as a trait that I've lived with my entire life. That doing things that just didn't make sense were something that I always at least questioned. And more than questioned, I took the consequences. I think probably the most famous line out of William Shakespeare is a line that is most quoted because it is that which tells us an enormous truth. To be or not to be. That is the question. And it's a very powerful and important question to ask yourself. Am I going to be? Am I not going to be? But the lines that followed it were even more significant. Whether 'tis nobler in the minds of men to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and thus by opposing end them. And so you have to always ask yourself that question. I think I was doing that. I didn't quote Shakespeare in those days. But I knew that doing things that didn't seem right or didn't make sense or were just being done because everybody else did them, didn't fit in. And when I told my biology teacher that I wouldn't be doing that, he sent me to the principal's office. And I sat in the principal's office on this bench that had been worn smooth by generations of people just like myself, waiting to see the principal. And I waited a Monday and then a Tuesday and a Wednesday, and finally on Thursday morning I was escorted into the principal's office. And he informed me that everybody had to do the leaf collection and I was no better than anybody else. And if I didn't do it, I would be taking biology over again in the summer. But in those 3 days that I waited for the principal to make his decision about what my consequences were going to be, they left books for us to read, hoping somehow that perhaps even if we didn't read it just by osmosis, just by sitting next to it, perhaps some of this wisdom would come to us. And one of the books that they left there for us to read was written by a man who came into this church and who lived right here in this town. His name was Henry David Thoreau. And it was called Walden Pond. And I read through Walden, and it was all about nature, and it was all about sort of having a great reverence for all that is natural. But at the back of that particular edition, there was an essay that he had written. And the essay was called On the Necessity of Civil Disobedience. And I'd like to recommend to any of you who are running schools, if you have children that you are trying to get to conform and to fit in and to be just like everybody else, don't have them read Thoreau. And don't tell them to read Emerson's essay on self-reliance, which also happened to be at the back of this particular edition. And in that particular essay, he was talking about the importance of taking a stand against things that you thought were foolish, and about not just fitting in and not just being what everybody else tells you should be. And by the time Thursday got in there and I went into the principal's office, I felt like I was an American philosopher. I felt like I was someone that should be in there being recognized and have books written about, rather than someone being told to write a leaf collection. And I had a girlfriend at that time. Her name was Mary Jo, and Mary Jo was one of those people that we called curve breaker. She didn't just do a leaf collection. She would have it indexed, and she would have it color-coded, and she would send to Australia for eucalyptus leaves. And she offered to even do it for me, and I said, no, it's a matter of principle. I said, it just doesn't make sense to make people do things just for the reason of fitting in and being just like everybody else. And that was my introduction to transcendentalism. And Thoreau became someone that I had great admiration for. And Emerson, who was considered to be America's teacher, I had incredible respect for. Thoreau had a wonderful definition of success in that essay. He said, if you advance confidently in the direction of your own dreams and endeavor to live the life which you have imagined, you will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. And it's always been my very favorite definition of success. Advancing confidently, making the decisions that make sense to you, being independent of the good opinion of everyone else out there, trusting in here that this is why I'm here, and there's music playing inside of me, and I must let that music come out. And too many of us don't. When I say a spiritual solution to every problem, I'd like everybody in the audience to just do me a favor, if you will. I'd like you to just point to yourself. Everybody, just for 1 second, just point to yourself. And just look around and just notice how people are. And notice that nobody's doing this. Not one person in the room is doing this. Why is that? Because who we are is not here. Who we are is what? Here. And where have you all pointed to? You pointed to your heart. Shakespeare again put it this way. He said, go to thy bosom, knock there, and ask your heart what it doth know. What it doth know. Listening to your heart is what, to me, represents the approach to a spiritual solution to every problem. There's 3 words in that title, in the title of this program: spiritual, solution, and problem. I'd like to just take a brief look at each one of them and what they mean to me. I'd like to take the word problem first. You know, I've been studying something for several years, and the thing that I've been studying is called A Course in Miracles. And A Course in Miracles is a very interesting collection of brilliant writing that I think if the world were living by it, perhaps we would have far, far fewer of the conflicts and struggles and so on that we have amongst ourselves and amongst nations and in our families and so on. And one of the lines that I came across in studying A Course in Miracles hit me very, very strongly. And this line, I couldn't get it out of my head. And here's what it said in there. It said, "You do not have any problems. You only think you do." You do not have any problems. You only think you do. Our problems are things that we carry around inside of us. And if we could recognize that these things that we call problems, no matter what they are, and I'm not here standing up here talking to you on television telling you that the financial concerns that you face every day, the struggles that you face in your relationships, the whether or not you're going to be able to handle the health concerns and challenges that are facing you, all of these things that have come into our lives that we have labeled problems. But I'd like you to just remind yourself of where they are. They're not out there. They're in here. And they all represent something that I call energy. And one of my very favorite people in all the world, because he was not only a great scientist and a great thinker, but he was a great humanitarian as well. He would have really done well here in Concord. His name was Albert Einstein. And Einstein once said, "Nothing happens until something moves." Nothing happens until something moves. Everything is movement. Things look solid to us. You know, this watch on my arm looks solid. But if I were to take a microscope and turn up the magnification and look at this thing under a very, very strong microscope, you would see that it's really a dance. It's alive. It has molecules. Inside those molecules, there are all kinds of tiny little atoms. Inside those atoms are electrons and neutrons and protons and croutons and whatever it is, all of these things that we memorized when we were in physical science classes and so on. And then we have a new thing called quantum physics, and we look inside of these electrons and we find subatomic particles and subatomic particles. And what we've discovered through all of this is that everything is just energy. And you're watching a television set right now. And that television set has something coming into your home called energy. And you are looking at it, so there's visual energy, and you're hearing sound, you're hearing my voice right now, so there's something in the air between your receiver and my speaking here right now, something called sound waves, and they're all just energy. And if we were to understand how that energy comes into us, it comes into us through our senses, through our ears and through our eyes. And if we were to block off our ears and take all of the energy that was coming in the room into our ears, but before it hit our ears, we were to send it off to a scientist and say, "Give me a report, please, on this energy." They would send out the report, and they'd come back, and you'd look at it, and you'd say, "Well, what's in there? What is this?" And they'd say, "Well, there's a lot of movement. There's a lot of energy. Some of it's very fast. Some of it's very low. Some of it's high. Some of it's low." I'd say, "But are there any problems in this report?" They'd say, "No, there's no problems in the energy. It just comes in high and it comes in low. It comes in fast and it comes in slow." And you know, that's one of the most important principles that you can learn and master in terms of identifying things that we call problems. That energy only becomes something that we convert into problems when we put it into our head and begin to process it in a certain way. And as we process it in certain ways, we tell ourselves, these things are going to get worse, or this is a terrible experience that I'm going through, or my finances are, or I've just had this terrible bout with a disease, or whatever it might be. And all of it is something that we carry around with us. What I'd like you to do sometime is open up the Torah, or the Old Testament, and look at the opening line of the Old Testament, of the Torah. And the opening line of the Torah, these ancient spiritual texts that we all rely upon and live by, And it says, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. Most of us have gotten through at least Genesis 1:1, all right? And we understand that. Now you move ahead 31 lines later, and it says, and all that God created was good. Now we're presented with an enormous conundrum, a difficulty in our minds. Everything was created by God, and everything that God created was good. Therefore, how do we ever explain bad? How do we explain evil? How do we explain problems? How do we explain so many of these things that are so much a part of our lives, of our consciousness? You have to see that these are all things that came about when we invented something called the ego. And this ego is nothing more than an idea that we carry around. And this idea that we carry around says that who I am is separate from this source, this perfection into which I was created. That I am separate from it. And as a result of being separate from it, I am what I have, I am what I do, I am what everybody else out there thinks of me, I am my reputation, I am separate from everybody else, and I am separate from God. The other line that came to me in A Course in Miracles, where it uses the word problem, said this: if you do have a problem, the only problem you have is your belief that you are separate from your source. The moment that we took on this idea that we were separate from our source and no longer believed in our own integrity of our own mind, the moment that we took on that, we began to develop something called problems, something called illusions. And I'd like to suggest to you that every problem that we have, the way I see it, is nothing more than a mistake or an illusion. And how do we do something about these mistakes that we have? They are in our minds. You know, it says very clearly in most of the spiritual literature, as a man thinketh, so is he. Emerson, one of the people that we revere, who lived right here in Concord, said that the ancestor to every action is a thought. Once you start to understand that what you think about, your thoughts, is what expands and becomes your life, you start getting real careful about what you think about. Real careful. So that when you have a thought that says, gee, I got a sniffle, it's in my nose, but tomorrow it'll probably be down here in my throat. And on Wednesday, it's probably going to be here in my chest. Always seems to happen this way. And on Thursday, I'm going to have a fever. I get one every time. You can just about count on it. I'm going to have to take Friday off. Now, it's Monday morning, and you got a sniffle, but in your mind, in your thoughts, you're taking Friday off with a fever, and lo and behold, your body begins to react to this thought, which is just a mistake of the intellect to begin with. Supposing that you had a belief system that said 2 + 2 is 7. For some reason, you were just hung up on this idea. And you said 2 + 2 is 7, and you took your calculator and you reformulated it in such a way so that it would appear to be 2 + 2 is 7. And then you tried to balance your checkbook, and you tried to make your life work based upon this formulation, that 2 + 2 is 7. You would find that your life would be out of balance financially virtually all of the time. Every time you push that button and push those numbers, nothing would ever work. So the question is, what do I do in order to correct this mistake in my thinking? And that's where the word solution comes in. But we can't bring the solution in until we understand that everything that we have, do you know that every relationship that you're in right now, every single person watching this, every relationship you're in is in your mind. You can't get behind the eyeballs of another human being and be them. All you can do is process them through your thoughts. Now, if your thoughts about the person that you love are about what is wrong, about what you don't like, about what they ought to be, about what they used to be, about how they disappoint you, about how bad they talk, about their language, about anything at all, if that's what you're thinking about, what you think about is what expands, more of what you're thinking about will continue to show up in your life, whether you like it or not. It's one of the great ironies. I always tell people that if you understood this concept, the best way to do it is to put it in terms of money. If I had $1 million, and I were to take this $1 million, and I were to give it to you, and I'd say, this purpose of this $1 million is for you to go out to the mall, and every store you come to where you see something that you really like, you're to purchase it. Any place you go, whatever you like, you purchase it. So you take this $1 million and say, this is great. You walk into the first store that you see, and there's a rug there that's just appalling. It's hideous. It's just awful. It doesn't match anything in your house, and it costs $10,000. And you look at that thing and you say, ugh, I would never want that. Here's $10,000. Send it home. Now you go to the next store in the mall, and it's got a lamp in it that matches the rug, all right? And you look at this hideous lamp, and you say, that's the worst-looking thing I've ever seen. Send 2 of those home, and they cost $5,000 apiece. So far, you've taken your money, and you've spent $20,000 of it on what you don't want. And all day long, every time you saw something that you didn't want, you spent your energy, your money, on sending it home. Then you get home, and you say to yourself, why is my house filled with all of this stuff that I don't want? And the answer is, you're crazy. This is called insanity. You have energy to spend it on what you do want, yet you continue to use it to purchase what you don't want. And the metaphor here is that your thoughts work exactly the same way. The energy that you have for creating what you want is in your thoughts. And if you want your relationship to be divine and to be perfect and to be beautiful, then you have to begin to think the kinds of thoughts that are going to create that for you. If, on the other hand, you put your thoughts on what the person isn't, what they ought to be, what they used to be, what you think is wrong, you'll see more of that showing up. And it works in everything in your life. Changing your mind, changing your thoughts is how we change the problems, if you will, that we face in our life. Okay? Now, the word spiritual, there's a spiritual solution to every problem. I am not speaking here about anything that has to do with organized religion or anybody else's religion. I respect everybody's right to worship and be a part of any organization that they choose. And I'm not here to recruit anybody. I don't belong to any organizations. I'm not here trying to convince you to be something other than just a happier, more fulfilled person who can understand that there is a means to bringing a spiritual solution to things in your life that you don't like. These illusions, these mistakes that you have made. Because remember, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth, and all that was created was good. So that anything that isn't good has come about because of your belief in your mind that you are separate from this divinity. You are not what you have. You are not what you do. You are not what others think of you. You are the beloved. You are the divine. You are a creation that is made into perfection. When I use the word spiritual, I'm speaking now about a way of being. I'm speaking about not being a Buddhist, but being Buddha-like. I'm speaking about not being a Christian, but being Christ-like. I'm speaking about not being a Muslim, but being Muhammad-like. I'm speaking about a way of living which includes specifics, unconditional love, the ability to be able to send love in response to hate, in response to anger, in response to fear, the ability to live that. I'm speaking about the understanding that who I am is not a human being here having a spiritual experience, but it's the reverse. That who I am is really a spiritual being having a human experience. And so there's an infinite part of me. There's a part of me that was never born. There's a part of me that never dies. I've often said that one of the keys to higher awareness is having the ability to step outside of who you are and just become the observer to your life. And when you do that, you Tune into the infinite. Carl Jung, one of the greatest teachers, I think, that ever walked on this planet, once said that the telling question of a person's life is their relationship to the infinite. Once you have that relationship to the infinite, I remember I wrote a book a few years ago. It's called Your Sacred Self. And in this book, I talked about the distinction between the ego, this part of us that wants to prove that we're right, and the part of us that wants to be at peace. And a woman came up to me at a talk, and she was one of these people who was going to give me some feedback about my book. And she said, she said, I read your book, and I didn't get anything out of it. I said, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. She said, the only thing I can tell you that I got out of it is that now, after reading it, I no longer have a fear of dying. I said, that's all you got out of one book? This thing that all of us are always in dread of, and you read that? She said, yeah. She said, it just seemed like I understood that I'm an infinite soul after reading that. I said, well, perhaps that was the message that you had to learn, you know. So to me, spiritual means also it means becoming quiet. It means being able to make conscious contact with your source. To no longer have a sense of everything has to be loud. I have to be constantly talking. For me, meditation is such an important part of my life. I tell people who say they don't have time to meditate, I say, you're in a car, aren't you? You drive back and forth to work? I say, well, yes, I do that at 30 minutes each way. I said, well, how often each day do you think you spend at a red light? The person will say, well, I stop at least 6 or 7 times. I say, that's maybe 1 or 2 minutes each time. They say, yes. I'll say, what I do at red lights is I just stop because my car has come to a stop and my body is in the car, so therefore it has come to a stop. The only thing that's usually still going is my mind. All right? So I say to people, take that minute or two to close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, and make conscious contact with your source. Reconnect to your source. There's always somebody behind you to let you know when your minute is up. It never fails. All right? Most of us don't understand that this business of making conscious contact can be illustrated, and if you get it, understand it. See, I think of my source as the ocean, and I think of myself as a glass. And if I were to take this glass and I were to dip it into this ocean of abundance and say, what do I have here? What I have here is a glass of my source. Now, it's not as big, and it's not as strong, but it is still a glass of my source, to which I am always connected. And if I were to take one drop of this source, and I were to put it over here, and I were to say to this drop of water, I would like you to create and sustain life. I would like you to perform miracles. I would like you to end all of my problems. And you watch that drop of water, separate from its source, you would see that it's going to change form from liquid into gas. And eventually it'll return to its source. There's no place else that it can go. There's only one source. But while this drop of water is separate from its source, it loses all of the power of its source. And this drop of water, separate from its source, is a symbol or a metaphor for your ego. The part of you that believes that you have separated from this divinity into which you were created. And as long as you're here, believing that you're separate from it, you will not understand the powers that you get when you figure out a way to reconnect to your source. And becoming quiet and becoming someone who is making conscious contact with your source is what I'm asking you to look at. Because once you leave this ego behind, once you leave behind this idea that I'm separate from it and reconnect to it, then all of the powers of the source, of the ocean, the powers to create and sustain life, the powers to heal, the powers to attract abundance into my life, the powers to make my relationships divine and beautiful, the powers to appreciate, the powers to be miraculous. As one of my teachers, Abraham Maslow, once said, that self-actualizing people, these people who live at the highest levels, are people who must be what they can be. They must be what they're potentially capable of being. And this is what I mean by being in the world of spirit. One of my favorite Persian poets, Rumi, who lived back in the 13th century, once said, "Sell your cleverness and purchase bewilderment." Be in a state of bewilderment. That's what I mean by being spiritual. One of the ways to test whether you're on the path that I'm speaking about, the path of being into a spiritual being, having a human experience rather than the other way around, is to detect in yourself how much of my energy and my time do I spend being in a state of cheerfulness. How cheerful am I? Or how morose am I? How down am I? How, when I'm coming home to my family and to those that I love, how am I anticipating what it's going to be like when I go into the house? Am I down more? Am I unhappy more? Am I looking at the pessimistic side of life? Am I always feeling that something might be wrong? Am I putting my attention on what I don't want? Because if your thoughts are on what you don't want, and what you think about is what expands, what you don't want is what you'll continue to see showing up in your life. You'll keep purchasing it. Another element of what we call spiritual in these three words in this program is the sense or the extent to which you feel connected to other people. You see, the ego is the part of us that believes that we're separate from each other. I'm separate from you, you're separate from me. You have a different body than I do. I'm separate from what I would like to attract into my life, and I am separate from God. When you move into a spiritual approach to life, you begin to see yourself as connected to everyone and everything. And competition is replaced by something called cooperation. And when you see another human being in pain or struggling, you know that a part of you is in pain and struggling. And you begin to reach out rather than looking within and saying, how does this affect just me? It's almost as if you have to make a shift. And there's a wonderful story, and I'd like to share this story with you. It's a story, this is a story that took place at the Special Olympics in Seattle. And it's a true story. And when I read it, it really grabbed me. And I thought, when I do this program, I would like to share this with the rest of the world. A few years ago, at the Seattle Special Olympics, 9 contestants, all physically or mentally disabled, assembled at the starting line for the 100-yard dash. At the gun, they all started out, not exactly in a dash, but with a relish to run the race, to finish, and to win. All that is except one little boy who stumbled on the asphalt and tumbled over a couple of times, and he began to cry. The other 8 heard the little boy crying. They slowed down and looked back. Then they all turned around and went back, and every single one of them. And one little girl with Down syndrome bent down and kissed him and said, "This will make it better." Then all 9 linked arms and walked together to the finish line. Everyone in the stadium stood, and the cheering went on for several minutes. Isn't that a beautiful story? It's the kind of thing that I refer to when I use this word spiritual. A sense of an awareness that it isn't about being better than somebody else. I think true nobility is not about being better than anyone else. It's about being better than you used to be. And I know this about myself, that if any one of you watching this show, or any of you here in this audience were giving this talk, I could be sitting in that audience, and I would have just as much to learn from what you had to say to me as you have to learn from what I may be saying to you. The thing that I know for certain today is that I'm just better than I used to be. As a man, as a father, as a writer, as a speaker, I know that I'm better than I used to be. And I try to make that something that I do each and every day. Just a little bit better than I used to be. To me, that's what I mean when I use the concept of spirituality. So there we have problem, which is a mistake of the intellect, believing that we are separate from our source, things that we carry around inside of us. Remember that if any one of you were just suddenly given the wand, which took away your ability to think, all of your problems would go with it. All right? And Spiritual, it means cheerfulness, it means kindness, it means peace, it means love, it means forgiveness, it means living these principles, feeling connected and knowing that you're infinite. And finally, the word solution. And what is the solution? The solution is the most exciting part of the program. The solution for me represents the ability to bring to your life something that can make these things called problems disappear, dissolve, and nullify. And that is what I spoke about when I opened up here a little while ago about energy. Energy comes in the form of fast and slow, high and low. And higher and faster energy nullifies lower and slower energy. A room full of darkness. Darkness is a lower and a slower energy, if you measure it, than is light. And when you bring light to the presence of a dark room, the darkness disappears, and that is a metaphor for every single one of the problems and concerns and struggles that you are facing in your life. And way back, 800 years ago, there lived a little man who gave up all of his possessions. He lived in a little village in Italy, near Florence, called Assisi. And we named one of our most famous cities in America after him. His name was Francesco, or as he became known later after his passing, St. Francis of Assisi. And I went to Assisi, and I had miracles that took place for me in visiting Assisi on several occasions. And St. Francis was one of these people who created a prayer that is perhaps the most well-known prayer on the planet today, certainly one of them. And when I wrote A Spiritual Solution to Every Problem, I took the first 7 lines of this famous prayer and I made them into a chapter of the book. And I'd like to share those with you here in this program right now. Those 7 lines, because they represent an 800-year-old technology, if you will, for bringing a spiritual solution to anything in your life that constitutes a problem. The first line in this famous prayer says, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. How can I become an instrument of thy peace? The ego is the part of us that wants to be at war, that wants to defeat, that wants to collect, that wants to be better than, that wants to always get more. The sacred or the highest part of ourselves is the part of us that just wants to be at peace. How can I become an instrument of peace? Not someone who's looking for peace, but someone who delivers it. There are opportunities every day. I was in a gas station just a few days ago. And in this gas station, they had a car wash. And there was a young boy. He was maybe 18 or 19 years old. And he didn't speak English very well. And he couldn't figure out how to work the car wash. And he had put $2 in, and apparently it required $3. And he was in there waiting to pay for his car wash and trying to get an answer to why he couldn't get it to work. And I had just gotten some gasoline. And I walked in, and there was this man behind the counter berating this young boy and humiliating him and talking to him. And because he didn't understand the language, he talked louder to him. You know how people do that? You know, if someone doesn't understand you, you say, what I said is, and they say, I don't understand, and then you say it even louder. Well, that's what he was doing to this young boy. And I saw this is an opportunity right here, in this instant, to be an instrument of peace. And I put my arm around the young man, and I said, come with me. And I walked out to the machine, and I took $1, and I put it into and he walked away, and he was just so happy. One tiny little incident. These kinds of things, I suggest to you that you take this day and look for 5 occasions to be an instrument of peace. And you'll find one when you're on your way home, on the freeway. You'll find somebody who isn't going to let you get in. You find somebody who doesn't want to let you pass. And instead of giving them a hard time or being angry at them, try sending something called peace their way. There's a wonderful line that I have on the dashboard of my car. It says, I can choose peace rather than this. And it's always a reminder that no matter what I'm experiencing in my life, I want to be an instrument of peace. The second line in this very famous prayer says, where there is hatred, let me sow love. It's been said that the three most difficult things to do in the world are this. The first is to send love in response to hatred. The second is to defend the absent. That is, whoever's being gossiped about, you become their spokesperson. I do this with my children all the time when they're all saying this, and then she said that, and he said that. I'll say, excuse me, but who is defending the absent person here? Well, why should anybody defend her? I'll say, well, I'll just take her position right now, if you don't mind. And the third is to admit when you were wrong. And it doesn't mean necessarily to say, I just made a mistake. It means to say, I have been making the wrong kinds of choices in my life with my mind. I've been putting my attention on what I don't want, on what others want for me, on what the world ought to be, on what it used to be, and I can't understand why it just keeps showing up, what I don't want, what others want for me, what I despise. I have to admit, almost I have to rewrite my agreement with reality. And there's a woman that I have a great deal of admiration for who passed away a short time ago. Her name was Mother Teresa, a woman whom people all over the world revered, no matter what their religious persuasion. And this is one of the things that Mother Teresa said. When people say to me, how do I do this? How can I make this work? I say, this is a way. And I put this in the book, and I wanted to include it in this program. It's called The Final Analysis. And this is what she said. And there's so much beauty in this. And so much of what St. Francis was speaking about back in the 13th century, because he was a man who was ridiculed wherever he went. And he was just out there trying to teach people to bring the solution, spiritual solution to your problems. If hatred is existing in your world, that's an energy field. It's a lower and a slow energy than the energy of love. If you can bring love to the presence of that hatred, it will be nullified just as if you were bringing light to darkness. But for most of us, what we do when we see hatred is we respond in kind to that hatred. There's a wonderful book that I have a great affection for. It's called Power versus Force. It's written by a psychiatrist. His name is David Hawkins, and he's a PhD as well. And he talks about how mankind has not evolved because every time we have a dispute, what we do in that dispute is when someone has hatred or anger or any of these slower and lower energies, is that we respond with the same energy of hatred and anger. And what we do is we create a counterforce. And that counterforce weakens everyone in its energy field. They said of Jesus, they said of Buddha, they said of these great spiritual masters, and Mother Teresa was one, that when they would walk into a village, just their presence in the village and nothing more would raise the consciousness of those around them. Just by being in the presence of someone who radiates out this kind of love, you alter it and change it. And here's what Mother Teresa said. She said, people are often unreasonable, illogical, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, she said, people may accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you are successful, you will win some false friends and some true enemies. Succeed anyway. If you are honest and frank, people may cheat you. Be honest and frank anyway. What you spend years building, someone may destroy overnight. Build anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, they may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today, people will often forget tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best you have, and it may just never be enough. Give the world the best you have anyway. You see, she said, in the final analysis, it's all between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway. Isn't that beautiful? It's Mother Teresa, and you should applaud because she deserves that. Thank you. You begin to see that this is an 800-year-old technology. This prayer isn't the most famous prayer in the world, or one of them, because it just happens to be catchy. This prayer of St. Francis is revered by people of all persuasions all over the world because it represents a spiritual solution to any problem you could ever face. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. How can I bring pardon to the presence of injury? And what is pardon but forgiveness? And what is forgiveness but the ability to love someone in response to something that they may have done to you that you feel hurt by at some time in your life? There's a Chinese proverb that says, if you're going to pursue revenge, you'd better dig 2 graves. Because one of those graves will be for yourself. You know, I told you the story at the beginning of this program of my biology teacher and the leaf collection. Always be careful about how you treat anybody in your life. Even your little children. You may work for them someday. 15 years after I took biology for the second time that summer, because I wouldn't do a leaf collection, I received my doctorate degree from Wayne State University in Detroit. And I was given the opportunity to teach as a faculty member, as an adjunct faculty member there, Dr. Dyer. Very proud. With my own parking place. That was the best. And I was given my class assignment, and there was my roster, and I had 30 students in there, and this course was a course in child development, child psychology, and adolescent psychology. It was a course that all of the people who wanted to become administrators in the school system had to take in order to become certified as a school administrator. And there on my roster was my former biology teacher. True story. Now my student, needing this course in order for him to get on with his goals in his life. He did a leaf collection like you wouldn't believe. No, it's not true. No revenge. I didn't even tell him, but I often thought about sending him down to Australia to get some eucalyptus leaves. It's just a requirement of the course. Everyone has to do it. But I didn't. Where there is doubt, faith. How can I bring faith to the presence of doubt? Rabindranath Tagore, the great Indian poet, once said that faith is the sound that the songbird makes before the dawn. Before the dawn. The songbird has got incredible faith. He knows the dawn is coming. And the ability of each and every one of us to just go within and find something inside of us. Someone said to me today that that's fine what you're talking about, but he said, I'm an atheist. And I said to him, I said, try not to think of it in terms of whether or not you belong to a perfect system or whether God exists or doesn't exist the way you have been raised to believe. Try thinking of it as a presence. When you go to sleep tonight, look at your fingernails and know that in the morning they're going to be just a little bit longer than they were when you went to sleep. That there's a force in the universe that is everywhere. And this force doesn't grow your fingernails and stop yours from growing. This force doesn't allow your hair to grow. Well, that's not a good example for me. This force doesn't beat your heart and not mine. There's one force, one power in all of the universe, and it grows our fingernails and it beats our heart and it aligns the planets, and it opens every flower every morning, and it is this universal one song, universe, one song that connects everything in the universe. It is a way of looking at the world from a spiritual perspective. Where there is despair, said Francesco, let me send hope. Michelangelo once responded, he said, the greater danger is not that our hopes are too high and we fail to reach them. It's that they are too low and we do. I do talk radio across the country all the time. And people will call in with a disease that has been diagnosed as terminal. And I will always tell that person that whatever energy that allowed any miracle to ever take place, that law is still on the books. It hasn't been repealed. Go to that place. Go to that place within you, that quiet place where you have an awareness that you can commune and reconnect to your source. And go there and be at peace. Find that inner joy, that inner island, that inner Tahiti that Melville described, that allows you to know that I am not going to have despair. I'm going to have hope. Where there is darkness, light. And I've spoken already about this whole metaphor of darkness and light. One of the most beautiful quotes from Ralph Waldo Emerson, Ralph who sat right there, he said, there is no object so foul that intense light will not make it beautiful. And so often our thoughts are of darkness. So often at night, sometimes people they'll lie in their bed and they won't have any light in the room, and their minds will go into all of the fears and all of their worries and all of the stress. And I tell people, turn the light on. Bring light, literally bring light to that presence. Because in the daytime, when the sun is out, when you're out in the light, things just don't seem the same as they do in the darkness, do they? And it's that light, the bringing light to the presence of darkness. Light is a higher and a faster energy. Bring that energy to the presence of that lower and slower energy called darkness. And it is nullified. It can't survive, nor can hate, nor can anger. Perfect love, it says in the scriptures, perfect love casteth out all fear. Fear cannot exist in the presence of love. And sadness cannot exist in the presence of joy. Where there is sadness, Francesco said, let me bring joy. Let me find a way inside of me to bring joy into my life. Many people in my life have brought me great joy. Some of them are here today. One of them is a lady who has worked for me for over 20 years. She doesn't understand the concept of not having accidents yet, and I've talked over and over again about when you reach the level of consciousness I'm speaking about, you will access things called intuition and insight, and then you will not be slipping back into these worlds of problems. Her name is Maya Lebo. She sits right here. Thanks for being here, Maya. God bless you. So many wonderful and powerful people in my life. All of them have done this thing for me. They have brought joy to the presence at times in my life of perhaps worry, perhaps fear, perhaps a little grief, sadness. And when I see them, I know that I'm living this prayer. You know, when I was raising my children, and I'm still doing that, one of my little girls, her name is Sky, and when she was just a baby, she would love to sit on my stomach when we were in the swimming pool or in the ocean. And she would just sit up there, and she would love to sing. And when she would sit up on there, we would sing this song. And I would put my arms in the water, and she would be sitting up there. She's a year and a half old, and she would laugh. She was always full of laughter and beauty. And we'd sing this song. And as we'd sing the song, I remember going back into my home and writing the words down, because they seemed to me that some of the simplest things that we say to ourselves continuously often get repeated because there's such great wisdom in them. Like that quote I used earlier of Shakespeare's, to be or not to be. That is the question. It is the fundamental question that Emerson and Thoreau and Alcott and Hawthorne and Julia Ward Howe and all of these people who came here, Louisa May Alcott, so all of these people were asking these questions and asking people to look at their own lives and to find within them their own divinity and not be doubting that and finding fault with it. And as we would sing this song, I thought it had so much meaning, it had so much sense. And the song goes like this. Most of you know it. We would sing, row, row, row. And as we would sing, row, 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 I would think that just means to me, just go out there into your life and be and work and do. Because when you're born, Khalil Gibran, the Lebanese poet, said, when you are born, your work is placed in your heart. There's something that you came here to do. There's no mistakes in this universe. The only mistakes are the mistakes that we have, that we are separate from the perfection into which we were created. Row, row, row your boat. Don't row my boat. Don't row somebody else's boat. Don't try to row a boat that somebody else tells you you should be rowing. Row, live, work your own boat. And how do you row this boat? Always gently. Always gently. Always with love. Always with peace. Always with kindness. Row your boat that way. Row your boat gently down the stream. Don't row up the stream. It takes away all of your energy. And it'll just create a counterforce of frustration for you. Get in the stream of life and row your boat gently down the stream with the currents of life, with the great Creator. Merrily, always with joy, always with cheerfulness, merrily, 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 merrily. And you know, Thoreau put it this way. He said, our truest life is when we are in our dreams awake. Because life is but a dream. Let's sing it together just for a minute. Together. Ready? Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 merrily. Life is but a dream. That's all it is. It's just a dream. God bless you, and thank you for coming today.
Coming up next, a special bonus segment. Dr. Dyer demonstrates the energy of our thoughts, plus a special musical performance.
Everything in the universe has an energy. This isn't just scientific talk. We're now beginning to discover through some of the work that is being done by kinesthesiologists and so on, that every thought has an energy. And that thoughts go from very, very low and slow energy to very high and very fast energy. And these can be measured in terms of how they affect and impact us. And one of the best ways to see it is to just ask someone who has never participated in this before to come up, and we'll do a little demonstration of it. In Power versus Force, Dr. Hawkins speaks about this dramatically. I have spoken about it in this program, and I've also spoken about it and written about it in A Spiritual Solution to Every Problem. But I'd like to just demonstrate it for you so that you can see it put into practice by someone that I've never met before, who's here in the audience today. And I'd like her to come up. She's volunteered to come up. She's been mic'd. And come on up and say hello. This is Eleanor, is that right?
Eleanor.
Great.
Yes.
It's nice to meet you, Eleanor.
Nice to meet you.
I ask for someone who had been in at least a second marriage, someone who had been through a divorce, okay? Mm-hmm. So what I'd like to do is I'd like you to just stand and face me, if you will. And I'd like you to just give me your full name.
Eleanor Corey Waskovich.
Waskovich. I got to deal with a Waskovich, all right?
So don't I.
And you married a Waskovich, right? You must really love this guy, right? All right, Eleanor. So your name is Eleanor Corey Waskovich. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like you to take this arm, if you will, and I'd like you to hold it out, and I'd like you to make a fist, if you will. And I'm going to take 2 fingers here, and I'm going to put one hand here, and I'd like you to resist me as hard as you can. I just want to see, is that the truth? That is your name, Eleanor Corey
Yes.
Waskovich? You're telling me the truth?
I'm telling you the truth.
Okay, I'm going to resist. I'd like you to resist as hard as you can. And would you say that right now you are strong or weak? And that I'm putting pressure? Could you feel the pressure?
Yes.
Okay. Now what I'd like you to do is I would like you to make up a name when I ask you your name. And no matter how I try to persuade you to the contrary, I want you to tell me that this is your name. I want you to lie to me. You'll be forgiven for this, all right? It's
Yes.
just a demonstration, all right?
Okay.
Okay, so what is your name?
My name is Hilda Smith.
Hilda Smith.
Yes.
Okay. So you're telling me that your name is Hilda Smith?
Yes, I am.
And is that the truth?
Yes, it is.
That's the truth.
That's the truth.
What is your name?
Hilda Smith.
And that's the truth.
That's the truth.
Okay, hold on to that thought and resist me as hard as you can, okay? And I'd like you to, okay. Now give me your real name. What is your real name?
My name is Eleanor Corey Waskovich.
Is that the truth?
That's the truth.
Okay, resist me. Okay, now I'd like you to give me the other name. What is your name?
Hilda Smith.
Is that the truth?
That's the truth.
You're telling me the
I'm
truth.
telling you the truth.
Okay, hold on to that thought.
I'll
and
hold on
resist.
to that thought.
Okay, and resist me as hard as you can. Do you see the difference?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
There was no way I could keep my hand up.
Yeah. We could have saved $93 million by bringing President Clinton up here. Anyway, okay.
Can we try this at home?
You can.
Yes, we
absolutely.
can try this at home.
What I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to think back to your first marriage. And there was a time when you realized or something came about and you had an awareness that this marriage no longer could continue. Whatever it was that you were experiencing in that moment, whether it was sense of failure, sense of too bad, sense whatever it may, I'd like you to just go back to that moment when you realized and thought, I can no longer stay married to this man. I'd like you to hold your arm out, and I'd like you to resist me as hard as you can, okay? And resist, and would you say that that thought makes you strong or weak? Put your arm out again. Mm-hmm. Okay, go back to that moment, all right? It's a sad moment, I can tell, all right? And resist me. And would you say that moment makes you strong or weak?
That moment made me strong.
Okay, try again. Resist it. Then why am I able to push your arm down?
I don't know.
Okay.
You tell me.
All right. Now I'd like you to come to this marriage. Are you married now?
Yes, I am.
Are you happily married to Waskovich?
Well, you going to do the hand thing?
No, I'm not going to test it on whether it's a lie.
I am.
Okay. All right, so I'd like you to hold your arm out. And I'd like you to think in this moment, I'd like you to think about this marriage and this man, the man that you're married to, and how you feel about him right now. You know, that you're in love with this man. All right, just hold your arm and resist me as hard as you can. Resist. And would you say that that makes you stronger or weaker, that thought?
Stronger.
Okay, so the thought of the marriage that you're in and the love that you have makes you stronger than the thought that you... I'd like you to go back to a moment in your life, and I don't want you to share it here on television or anything. I'd just like you to think of a moment when you experienced shame in your life, all right? Something that you did, Eleanor, at some time in your life, young girl, woman, whatever it might be, that you felt shame. You don't have to share it or ask it, but I'd like you to just go to that thought and that feeling that comes about as a result of that thought. Try to relive that moment. Can you come back to that moment? Okay, and hold your arm out. And now you're thinking shame, okay? You're ashamed of something, okay? And resist me as hard as you can, all right? And what would you say?
I was feeling weak.
Okay, try again. Resist now as hard as you can,
I will.
okay? You're
Yep.
ashamed. Ready? And it's almost as if you have no strength at all. Shame on the map of consciousness computes at the absolute lowest, all right? I'd like you to think now of a moment of someone in your life that represents the highest spiritual energy that is possible. Whether it's a Buddha, whether it's Jesus, a Mother Teresa, a St. Francis, anybody at all that ever walked on this planet that to you symbolizes the highest spiritual values. And who would that be? So we can all have a picture of who that is.
Mother Teresa.
Mother Teresa, okay. Would you put your arm up, please? And I'd like you to get a picture of Mother Teresa, okay, and what she symbolizes, and resist me. And would you say that that is making you strong or weak? You're very confused by this. Okay, once again, Mother Teresa, okay?
Mother Teresa.
Okay. Now I'd like you to get a picture of someone that symbolizes evil. I'll give you a little help with it. Let's try an Adolf Hitler, okay? Someone who represented as symbolized putting children into ovens, someone who had a final solution, someone who is a symbol of that which we despise, perhaps, okay, or Charles Manson or something. Can you get a picture of Hitler?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so, and put this, and get that picture in your mind. Just get a picture and resist me as hard as you can. Resist as hard as you can. Did you say that that makes you strong or weak?
Well, weak.
Okay, now go to Mother Teresa. Just change the thought, okay, to Mother Teresa. Now go to Hitler. Change the thought. Can you see the difference?
Yeah.
Okay, so that every thought that you have has an energy about it. And when that thought is on the higher energies, the energies of love, the energies of kindness, the energies of acceptance, and there are many of these that we could demonstrate here, you are strengthened. And when you have a thought that is on hatred, on shame, on evil, it brings you lower. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Thank you. God bless you.
You've just heard me refer to my little baby, Sky. Well, she's going to be here singing a song that I always close my talks with. It's a song that was written by a man named John Newton back in the 18th century. It really is a symbol, a metaphor, if you will, for all that I've spoken about here. He called what I've been calling a higher and a faster energy, he called it grace, saying, I once was lost, and now I'm found. And it was grace, he said, that taught my heart to feel. It was grace that brought me home. This was a man who had gone from being a slave trader to an abolitionist in one moment. And the song represents to me the greatest spiritual message we can have. Bring grace to the presence of the times in our lives when we're lost, and we'll nullify and dissolve it.